just another sunny day and feeling warm once again. Temperatures very similar to Tuesday, with highs of 17 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from Scotland down through England and Wales. Now into Wednesday evening, we're going to see the cloud-free skies continue, and that will lead on to another sunny day countrywide on Thursday. I think on Friday there'll be a bit more cloud in the far north and northwest, but sunshine returns on Saturday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be looking ahead to Rishi Sunak's mini-budget, which is happening tomorrow. The Chancellor faces some huge judgment calls during his spring statement in the House of Commons. Can he afford to help hard-pressed families and firms as the cost of living squeeze bites? Can he afford not to? We'll be looking at all the angles on fuel duty, utility bills, food prices, farming. The cost of living crisis is impacting millions of us. So what can the Chancellor do about it? On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thanks, Liam. It's 1:01. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister is urging Russia to allow citizens to leave the besieged city of Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands are trapped with little food and water. He claims Russian forces are blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city and that of Kherson. Russia denies it's targeting civilians. Ukraine's former Prime Minister, Oleksiy Honcharuk, told GB News Kyiv is being bombed every day and every night, and no civilian in Ukraine or its neighboring countries is safe.
I believe that even the people in other countries like Poland, Baltic countries, Moldova, Georgia, they are not safe too, because Russia will not stop on Ukraine. And if we allow him to go, Putin to go further, he will go further. He will go as far as we let him go.
A UK government minister has said any use of chemical or biological weapons by Russia in Ukraine would be undoubtedly a war crime. Business Minister Paul Scully made the comments after US President Joe Biden's warning of clear signs that Russia may be preparing to launch such attacks. The US President says Putin's considering using chemical weapons because his back is against the wall and that there'll be severe consequences if he does.
He's asserting that we, America, have biological as well as chemical weapons in Europe. Simply not true. I guarantee you. They're also suggesting that Ukraine has biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine. That's a clear sign he's considering using both of those. He's already used chemical weapons in the past, and we should be careful what's about to come.
Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison for large-scale fraud. Navalny's one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations related to charges he says are fabricated. The Prime Minister's official spokesperson has accused Vladimir Putin of using trumped-up charges against those that seek to hold him to account. The terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has been lowered from severe to substantial for the first time in 12 years. The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said it shows the significant progress the country's made, but he noted the public should remain vigilant and report any concerns to the police. A 22-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murdering 19-year-old Sabita Tanwani. She was found dead at student accommodation in Clerkenwell in central London in the early hours of Saturday morning. Maher Maroof, of no fixed address, has also been accused of attacking a police officer. He's been remanded in custody until Thursday, when he'll appear for a hearing at the Old Bailey. The Met Police's approach to tackling corruption isn't fit for purpose. That's according to a watchdog. The report, ordered by the Home Secretary, found its procedures for rooting out corrupt staff are fundamentally flawed, and that it failed to learn lessons from the unsolved murder of private investigator Daniel Morgan back in 1987. The watchdog has given 20 recommendations for change within the force. The Met Police has welcomed the report and acknowledges it needs improvement. And a 17-month-old girl who died yesterday after a dog attack at her home has been named as Bella Ray Birch. Neighbours in the Blackbrook area of St Helens have spoken of their shock, calling her a beautiful little girl. The dog had only been with the family a week. It's since been put down. Merseyside police are appealing for witnesses and anyone who has any information about the dog.
Ray has lost her life in the most unimaginably terrible circumstances. It has left a family and a community grieving and in complete shock. Detailed investigations are continuing into this tragic event. Forensic examinations to determine the dog's breed are ongoing, and we are working to identify all the previous owners of the dog so we can establish its history.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on the money today on GB News TV, DAB plus digital radio and online, Rishi Sunak's putting the finishing touches to tomorrow's spring statement. As the cost of living squeeze tightens, will he borrow more to help hard-pressed firms and households? Or could that spark more inflation? Will the Chancellor go through with the national insurance rise for workers and firms? It's a tax increase the Labour Party say is unnecessary, and many Tory backbenchers view as a mistake. And as Western sanctions on Russia bind and fuel and fertiliser prices rise for farmers, shoppers are facing higher costs for food in the shops, even if it's produced in the UK. We talk to both arable and livestock farming. Meanwhile, probate fees are on the rise, the cost of verifying and unlocking the estate of a deceased loved one. We ask a leading probate lawyer, what's going on? Plus, for today's in-depth Money Talks interview, I'm speaking with Conservative MP Mike Wood. He represents Dudley South in the Black Country. Ahead of the Chancellor's spring statements, he wants business rates scrapped, and many small firms will agree with him, not least pubs and other hospitality venues. But will Rishi Sunak? That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on the money. Tomorrow, Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveils his spring statement to the House of Commons. Billed as only a mini-budget, this is actually, in my view, the most important economic statement Parliament has heard since the 2008 financial crisis. Even before this Russia-Ukraine conflict, UK inflation was at a 30-year high and growth was stalling. But Western sanctions and Moscow's countermeasures have sent global oil, gas and commodity markets into orbit, adding to our cost of living squeeze. Sunak's most recent budget was last October, when the world and Britain's economic prospects looked rather different. The economy was poised for rapid growth, with GDP set to expand 6% during 2022, according to official estimates, and inflation forecast to average just 4% this year. Well, when new official forecasts are unveiled tomorrow as part of the spring statement, growth in 2022 will be much slower and inflation much higher. That reality will hit investment and living standards, making it much harder for the Chancellor to spend. Highly respected Institute of Fiscal Studies, they say Sunak faces a huge judgment call tomorrow over whether or not to borrow more. As fuel and energy prices spiral, will the Chancellor do more to protect those on moderate incomes from rising energy costs, asked the IFS. If not, the public faces the biggest hit to household incomes since the 2008 crisis. Consider also that 1 in 5 workers are employed by the state, including doctors, nurses and state school teachers. And as the cost of living rises, Sunak will need to find more money to avoid a painful public sector pay squeeze. There are around 5.7 million public sector workers, and even before this Russia-Ukraine conflict, inflation was heading for 7% this year. The Chancellor needs to find an extra £10 billion, says the IFS, to raise public sector pay in line with prices, equivalent to an extra 2p on the basic rate of income tax. During the COVID pandemic, of course, Sunak borrowed heavily for furlough and other support measures. But this Russia-Ukraine conflict and those sanctions have put our public finances under even more serious pressure now. As inflation rises and living standards slide, can the government afford to do more to help hard-pressed households? Can it afford not to? And that's our question today, ahead of tomorrow's spring statement. How can Rishi Sunak counter the cost of living squeeze? Grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do. Today we have friend of the show, David Fife. He's the chief economist at Argos Media. Argos are a leading source of information and analysis on commodity prices, particularly oil and gas. And in the studio, another on-the-money regular. Here she is, Victoria Scholar, head of investment at interactiveinvestment.com. Victoria, let's start with you, because my opening was partly about borrowing, the huge judgment call that the IFS says that Sunak faces. And there are some borrowing numbers out this morning, aren't there, that mean he's got even tougher choices to make.
Well, I think the optics of the borrowing figures are actually pretty good. We've seen a strong improvement in terms of overall public sector net borrowing versus the same period last year. Now, on the one hand, we're seeing those interest repayments on government debt go up. So that's obviously a negative in terms of the government's deficit. But on the plus side, we are seeing the strength in the employment market, which is meaning higher wages, clearly seeing inflation coming through. That's leading to a lot more spending overall in the economy, which is increasing tax receipts. So broadly, it looks pretty good, these figures. And of course, it comes just before the spring statement, like you say. So we're going to be seeing what he can do to try and tackle that much discussed cost of living crisis.
On the other hand, and economists always say on the other hand, don't they? You mentioned those increased interest payments on the bigger debt that he's got. In February 2021, the government was spending £5.4 billion a month on interest payments. It's now spending £8.2 billion a month. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole package to help people with utility bills that are going up was only £9 billion over a whole year. This is over 8 billion quid a month just on interest payments.
Yeah, and this is clearly a consequence of the monetary policy tools that have been brought into effect in order to try and combat that inflation problem. So it is difficult, but we are seeing that offset quite significantly by the fact that spending is massively going up. Wages are rising significantly as well. We've seen a huge jump in VAT tax receipts, for example. So it does look as though revenue in terms of tax is on the rise.
Indeed. So let's turn to David Feifat, Argos Media. Great to have you on the show again, David. We really welcome your expertise. Now, there's a really interesting debate going on, isn't there, about fuel duty on petrol and diesel. In recent weeks, we've actually seen oil prices come down, but we've seen petrol and diesel prices continue to go up. I think we can show you a graph of that now. We have seen oil prices come down over recent weeks. Can we see the graph? There it is. So we see that black line there if you're watching on TV. Apologies to radio listeners. You've got a black line there of oil coming down since the beginning of March, and yet petrol and diesel prices have continued to go up. And David, I put that to the Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, when I interviewed him last week, and he said, yes, that's very interesting. I'm going to ask the petrol retailers about that. But we have since then seen oil prices go back up again, haven't we? Up above $115 a barrel.
Absolutely. I mean, you're highlighting what we're seeing in the oil market and in commodity markets generally, which is a huge amount of volatility. I mean, crude and the raw materials for manufacturing petrol and diesel surged by 35% on spot and wholesale markets between the time of the invasion and the end of the first week of March. They dropped by 25%. They're up by a further 20% the early part of this week. And I think volatility really is going to be baked into spot and wholesale prices. And you have to also bear in mind, you know, around about 45% of the pump price comprises the wholesale or the spot component. There's another 50% of the price that is tax. So
it's unbelievable, isn't it? We do charge very high tax on our motorists' fuel, don't we, in the UK? It's 55% now. It was actually up at 70% a few years ago. Since then, we've frozen fuel duty. The question now is whether or not the Chancellor is going to bring that fuel duty down. We'll see tomorrow. But something else I wanted to put to you, David, if I may. It's not just oil and gas, which I know Argos specialises in, but you'll have a view about other commodity prices too. We've seen wheat prices go up. We've seen corn prices go up. We've seen all kinds of foodstuff prices go up, not least because Russia's a huge exporter of so many of them, and Ukraine is a funnel, the Black Sea coast there, usually filled with container ships taking food out of that part of the world. None of that's happening. So do we expect those food prices to keep rising?
I think so. And you know, it's not just grains. You know, 25% of globally traded grain supplies come out of Russia and Ukraine. But there's also a similar proportion of globally traded fertilizers, which are coming out of Russia as well. So there's a sort of double whammy for food prices, which I think is going to be with us for a while until we get a better idea of how this conflict resolves itself. You know, that upward pressure on food prices is going to persist.
Not least because Russia and its ally Belarus are huge exporters of potash, which is used as fertilizer. Huge exporters Russia is of gas, which is used as a feedstock for fertilizer. Victoria, let's give the last word to you. What else are you expecting to see tomorrow, and how are financial markets bearing up ahead of what really is a pivotal statement?
I don't think this is a massively significant event in terms of financial markets across Europe. The FTSE has a big weighting. The main share index has a big weighting towards the banks and energy stocks. So if we were to see a windfall tax, for example, on oil and gas companies, we could see the likes of BP and Shell come under pressure. But it is all about, like you say, the cost of living crisis, the inflationary backdrop. I'll also be looking closely at the forecasts, because we had that upgrade from the Bank of England recently, projecting that inflation could reach 8%. It'll be interesting to see what the OBR has to say there.
Very interesting. That's the Office for Budget Responsibility, which are the forecasts that the Chancellor adopts by law. The Bank of England does separate forecasts.
Yes.
But I agree with you, Victoria. Those all-important growth forecasts and inflation forecasts, all the other numbers in the budget statement, in the spring statement, which it is tomorrow, hinge on that, don't they? And we'll be following that closely tomorrow. Victoria Scholar, thanks so much for coming in, of Interactive Investor. And, of course, David Fife from Argos Media. Fabulous guest to have with us as these commodity prices spiral. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be heading over to Buckinghamshire, where GB News reporter Amelia Harper is indeed looking into the impact of those high fertiliser prices on farmers that David Fife mentioned, and the impact of those costs ultimately on the price we pay for food in the shops. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read out some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Today is simply sunny and warm for the vast majority, but the odd shower is possible in one or two spots. High pressure still to the east of the UK, blocking weather systems from moving in from the Atlantic, maintaining a warm southerly airflow and a dry airflow as well, hence the largely cloud-free skies, but there are areas of cloud drifting north, and those areas of predominantly medium-level cloud could spark the odd shower, perhaps across the Midlands into the afternoon, or northern England, southern Scotland. But really, you'd be unlucky to be caught in a shower, because for the vast majority it's dry and it's sunny and it's warm. 15 to 18 Celsius widely across the UK, 19 or 20 degrees somewhere like London, Cambridge, Manchester or North Wales. Into the evening, and you can see some cloud there drifting north across the Midlands and northern England, and again a chance of a shower out of that cloud, but really that's the exception. For the vast majority it's just a clear night, and under those clear spells, temperatures in towns and cities dipping to 2 to 5 Celsius, and in the countryside are just a little below freezing, so a touch of frost first thing, and a few fog patches possible into east and northeast England. Those are the most likely places, but the fog will lift quickly by 9 or 10 a.m. Fog free and sunny once again. One or two showers again possible for the northern Scotland, perhaps eastern England, but for the vast majority it's just another sunny day and feeling warm once again. Temperatures very similar to Tuesday, with highs of 17 to 19 Celsius fairly widely from Scotland down through England and Wales. Now into Wednesday evening, we're going to see the cloud-free skies continue, and that will lead on to another sunny day countrywide on Thursday. I think on Friday there'll be a bit more cloud in the far north and northwest, but sunshine returns on Saturday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, as we've been discussing for weeks here on The Money, the war in Ukraine is putting pressure on UK farmers. British food producers are facing surging prices for fertiliser as exports from the world's largest producer, Russia, are hit amid global sanctions. And much of the world's grain is also produced in Russia and Ukraine. Our reporter, Amelia Harper, reports from a farm in Buckinghamshire with an arable and beef farmer.
Well, welcome to Ash Farm here in Buckinghamshire, and welcome to Richard Heddy. You are an arable farmer, and also, if I take a little step out of shot, you can see the lovely cows behind me, because you are also a beef farmer, or we've got one here coming up wanting to be centre stage. She's rather lovely, isn't she? But what we are here to talk about is the situation and the war in Ukraine, and how Putin's invasion of Ukraine is affecting UK food supplies. Now, there are two main problems, and we'll discuss this more in more detail in a second, but just to outline what's going on. Oh, hello again. We have problems with fuel and fertiliser, and secondly with grain. Now, Russia is the world's largest exporter of fertiliser. Russia has come under international sanctions, and therefore prices for fertiliser have skyrocketed as farmers look for other sources. And secondly, grain. Russia and Ukraine produce a huge amount of the world's wheat. They account for 30% of global wheat exports, and as a result, Ukrainian farmers are normally planting those crops for next year's harvest. However, men are taking up arms and fighting for their country, and therefore that is not happening, and as a result it is having a knock-on effect on global food supplies. But here to tell us a little bit more, surrounded by your cows, Richard, tell me what is happening. Let's start with the fertiliser. Are you having to limit the amount of fertiliser that you use, perhaps to try to spare some for next year?
Yes, we're having to be really careful with it. You know, it's worth 3 times what it was last year. We're not sure we'll be able to get any more in, or when we will be able to. So we've just got to be really careful. But then again, we can't stinge on it. If we don't put enough on our crops, we won't get the yield, the quantity, and we won't get the quality. And we need the quality of wheat to produce bread-making wheat and feed the country. So it's really important we use it, but at the same time, we need to be very careful about how we do it.
And also, of course, we are surrounded here by cows. How do you decide whether to produce that to feed them or whether to produce it for bread?
It's always a difficult challenge. You've got to balance these things. The cattle can finish off grass alone, so I think we probably need to prioritise making bread this year, put the extra nitrogen on, get the quality, and just let the cattle have the grass, because we need to feed the world. And I think there's going to be a bit of a pinch this year. Ukrainian farmers aren't being able to get out into their fields to plant their crops. So where's that wheat going to come from? And we don't want people to go hungry. So, you know, as farmers, it is our job and our mission to feed the country, and that's what we're going to do.
And what happens next year if you can't then get hold of fertiliser?
Well, organic people are doing this, so we've got to try our best. It's a really hard job to do. We will get massive drops in yield, but, you know, we'll step up to the challenge and we'll try our best.
And what is the situation for wheat? Because you grow some wheat here. What's happening for you on that front?
So the wheat we harvested last year, we've still got in store, so that has doubled in value, and that's the highest prices we've ever seen for it. So we're quite lucky we held on to it until quite late. But we don't really want to profiteer from a terrible situation. But then again, our costs are skyrocketing, our ag chemicals, our fuel, our fertiliser. So I don't think we're going to have bigger margins because of this grain price. I think at the end of the day, everyone's going to be pinched, including us.
So you don't think that perhaps the increased prices that you might get for that wheat would somehow counteract the increased cost that you're seeing overall?
I think it'll help, but at the end of the day, you know, everything's rising in price. You know, as a customer, you can see in the shops, everything's rising. It's the same for us. Everything that we need to buy in to run our business is skyrocketing at the minute, and it's going to be a struggle to make things pay.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for your time. It's been great to hear from you. So just to summarise, I think it is clear to see that Putin's invasion of Ukraine is going to continue to impact global food supply chains, whether that's through limited fertiliser supply or whether that's to do with Ukrainian farmers not being able to plant that wheat.
Amelia Harper there, down on the farm in Buckinghamshire. Now, this isn't the only part of farming being affected. Pig farming has also been badly impacted by this conflict, as both Ukraine and Russia are two of the biggest suppliers of wheat, which is then used for animal feed. British pig farmers have even warned the industry could collapse in the wake of those rising feed prices, which have doubled in a week. And it's the most recent blow to pig farmers who've already been hit by a decline in the number of abattoir staff. Thousands of pigs have been culled and then, quotes, thrown away because of a lack of butchers to process them. Well, joining me now to speak about this is Rebecca Veal. She's a Senior Policy Advisor at the National Pig Association. Rebecca, great to have you with us here on The Money. You're joining us from Devon.
Thank you.
What would you say to the Chancellor ahead of tomorrow's spring statement in terms of the problems that your members are facing in a vital part of the British food chain?
Our producers have never been in such a challenging position. If you look back at the last year, pig farmers have been losing money for all of 2021. In the first quarter, that was £25 per pig produced. And towards the end of the year, that became £39 per pig produced, which is a significant sum of money. You look at the prices this week. Today, the wheat price stands at £300 per tonne. That's double what it was 2 years ago. Fuel prices are increasing, and pig farmers have still got pigs backed up on farm, so they're making less money out of the pigs that they're producing. It's a very challenging position, and we need continued government support. They've never provided our sector with any direct support. We continue to ask for that. But in reality, they've been not particularly keen on providing that. And so we've asked for their support with regard to asking for more money through the retailers. The price that is paid to producers needs to reflect the cost that they are incurring. And otherwise, pig farmers are going out of business, and we won't end up with a pig sector.
To what extent, Rebecca, are wholesalers and the supermarkets putting the squeeze on pig farmers? Because that's also part of the problem, isn't it? It's not just about a lack of government support.
No, retailers are very supportive of British producers, and we've seen that increase in the last couple of years, particularly since COVID, which is really admirable. But what we now need them to do is to pay a fair price for the pork that they are selling. And that, unfortunately, when the costs are rising so significantly, is just not balanced at the moment.
I think it's worth stressing, isn't it, Rebecca, that pig farming, it's really hard to sort of, dip in and out of pig farming. It takes a while to raise a piglet to the state where it can be sold to an abattoir for meat. This isn't something that farmers can just turn on a sixpence and try something different. Pig farmers, they spend a lot of money preparing their farm, preparing the facilities, raising their stock. So there's going to be lots of families ruined, not least as well as the impact for food security, if something doesn't happen to help your members.
Absolutely. The decisions that are made today will come to fruition in 9 to 12 months' time. So these are not decisions that are made overnight in terms of production. And so even when producers decide to exit the industry, that's not a decision that's made overnight generally. I think, when you look at the level of infrastructure and the level of requirements in terms of what producers do today to achieve, the vast majority of pigs in this country are red tractor assured. That is high welfare systems. And that is what our consumers expect. And unfortunately, if we end up losing pig producers, which we are, we've already lost 10,000 sows from the herd, then we will be losing that high quality pork from our diets. And I personally don't think that's what consumers want. And
just give us a sense, Rebecca, if you can, of the scale of pig farming in the UK. Do you have any estimate of the number of people employed, the number of families supported? What are we at risk of losing, as well as, you know, a national dish, frankly? What are we in danger of losing here in terms of the economy?
So the industry is worth billions, and it's not just in direct production. We have to think about the allied industries as well, and that supports huge amounts of the rural community. Now, pig farming is mainly in the east and the north of the country. However, there are pig farmers across the country that are supporting the rural communities, and that might be through direct employment, that might be through feed suppliers, buildings producers. You know, the list goes on and on. It's worth billions of pounds. It's worth a lot in terms of export because we don't eat the entire carcass. And so it's hugely valuable to our economy. And that's why we need retailers to step up and government to support us.
Rebecca Field there, of the Senior Policy Advisor at the National Pig Association. Thanks a lot for joining us, Rebecca, from Devon, ahead of Rishi Sunak's spring statement. Tomorrow, he's got some really tough choices. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview. And because of that spring statement, we're interviewing the MP Mike Wood, who represents Dudley South in the Midlands. We'll be looking ahead to Rishi Sunak's choices tomorrow, focusing on the hard-hit hospitality industry. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thanks, Liam. It's 1:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Ukraine's deputy prime minister is urging Russia to allow citizens to leave the besieged city of Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands are trapped with little food, water or medicine. He claims Russian forces are blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city. Kherson, which has more than 300,000 residents, is reportedly in a similar situation. Russia denies it's targeting civilians. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison for large-scale fraud. The jailed Kremlin critic is one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations related to charges he says are fabricated. His lawyers say he plans to appeal the decision. A 22-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murdering 19-year-old Sabita Tanwani. She was found dead at student accommodation in Clerkenwell, central London, in the early hours of Saturday morning. Maher Maroof has also been accused of attacking a police officer. He's been remanded in custody until Thursday, when he'll appear for a hearing at the Old Bailey. A 17-month-old girl who died yesterday after a dog attack at her home has been named by Merseyside Police as Bella Ray Birch. Neighbours in the Blackbrook area of St Helens have spoken of their shock, calling her a beautiful little girl. The dog had only been with the family a week. It's since been put down and will be examined to determine whether or not it's an illegal breed. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Liam and On the Money in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, thousands of bereaved families across the UK face hard times as probate fees have risen again. This comes after the government introduced a flat fee of £273 to unlock a loved one's estate, increasing by 27% from the previous cost of £155. Now, the Ministry of Justice claims that the current system operates at a loss and places an unfair burden on the taxpayer. But what does this mean for families, and where can they go for more help and advice? Well, joining me now to talk about this is Priti Shah. She's a probate solicitor at OGR Stock Denton. That's a full-service law firm. Priti, thank you so much for coming into the studio. Now, I'm a little bit confused. I'm a bear of little brain. So this is... I thought when there's probate, so we're trying to unlock somebody's will, there's nothing untoward, it's just the legal documents there, it needs to be looked at by a lawyer, of course. I thought solicitors charged a percentage of the estate sometimes. So is this probate fee in addition to that?
OK, so the probate fee, you're quite right, is an addition in that it is a fee charged by the court service. Now, actually, the fee to use a professional, it was £155, the probate fee. But if you did it yourself, it was £215. So they've now increased that to £273. So this actually is a modest increase compared to what they had planned initially. Before, they were talking about fees of £20,000 if your estate was $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the flat fee on top of what the lawyers will charge.
Right. So some lawyers do charge a percentage of the estate.
Okay.
Not all lawyers work like that. A lot of lawyers like ourselves only work on a time basis. So we basically charge for the work that we do.
Okay.
So, you know, it's especially in this world where property prices are at its peak and the cost of living, and everyone's concerned about that. We try and be fair and charge just on a time basis.
Because it is quite a difficult time for people, isn't it? Someone will have died, perhaps a parent, perhaps a sibling, an uncle or an aunt or something. You don't want to feel that you're being ripped off. And I'm not saying for a second that your law firm would do that. You very kindly volunteered to come and talk to us, and we're grateful. So I guess the legal profession does have a bit of an obligation to treat people with sensitivity during this key point, and I'm sure you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very difficult time when you've lost someone, and then to try and get your head around the probate process, having to pay inheritance tax is very difficult. So what we try and do by approaching a professional, they can guide you through that process to make it as uncomplicated as possible, and then try and achieve the outcome that they want in the most tax-efficient manner. So, you know, it does pay to see somebody who's qualified and who specialises in this area of law, because the savings that can be achieved from, you know, tax and obviously there is a small hike with the probate fee, but the tax savings that can be achieved far outweigh the additional cost of the probate. So by seeing a professional, they can help you guide through the process, make it as simple and stress-free as possible.
Which is what everyone wants.
Absolutely. And at the same time, hopefully save them some inheritance tax.
So, Priti, let me ask you, let's pretend, obviously, this is all completely made up. There's no legal obligation here at all. But let's say you had somebody who died and they had a house worth, say, £250,000, and that was in a will, and so you'd have to pay the probate fee for the courts to check that will, make sure it was all proper and in order, and then there'll be other issues about inheritance tax and so on. Let's just park those inheritance tax issues. But how much could an ordinary family expect to pay in terms of a percentage of that 250,000? How much would the solicitors you ordinarily charge, or how long would it take?
So you're referring to solicitors' charges rather than inheritance tax?
Yeah, let's forget about the inheritance tax because that's too complicated.
So, I mean, as I said, that some solicitors charge a percentage, and that can be from 1% to 3%, which which can eat into the inheritance quite significantly.
So 3%, that would be $7,500.
Yeah,
on
that's before any work's done. However, a lot of solicitors don't charge on that basis. As I said, we don't charge on that basis, and we would charge on a time basis, and it would really depend on how much work was involved in that, what other assets did the deceased have apart from this property that you mentioned for £250,000.
You'd have to go to the land registry, check the person who says they own it, actually do own it, maybe go to the local council and validate the claim with them.
The process involves you finding out details of the deceased assets and liabilities. Then you have to file, in most cases, a return with the revenue.
Yeah,
and
to make sure the government isn't owed any money.
Yeah, and you have to pay the inheritance tax before you can then go and apply for the grant of probate if inheritance tax is an issue. And then once you have the grant of probate, that's the stage where you can then proceed to transfer assets, for example, a property to the beneficiaries or cash in the bank.
It's quite involved. It's quite involved.
It is quite an involved process, and there are deadlines to meet, it really is advisable to make sure that you take help from a specialist, someone qualified who can help you guide through that process and make it pain-free.
But just finally, briefly, Pretty, fabulous advice, very, very clearly expressed, if I may say so. One of our viewers has just asked, you can't avoid probate, it's a legal requirement, right? If you want the ownership transferred properly in a way the land registry or the law recognises, you have to go through that probate process.
OK, so it depends on the asset. There are, if the only assets are, say, bank accounts and the amounts in there are less than £15,000 in most cases, then banks will release that money without probate. But in most other cases, yes, there is a process to be followed to release those assets, which, as you've indicated, is probate.
Pretty Shah, I know it's your first time on TV. That was absolutely fantastic. OGR, Stock Denton.
Thank you.
Your full-service law firm. Be great to get you back on the show another time. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Liam, for your time.
Pretty Shah there. Now, let's bring in some of your views. Kenny says, we're all doom and gloom about the economy this year, but don't forget how easy some people have had it lately with low interest rates and therefore mortgage rates and competitive low prices on everything for years. It had to end before long. Stuart says the US are planning to hike interest rates and have been blamed for failing to do so for around 4 years. Jared Lyons is a former Boris Johnson economic advisor who's been on this show many times. Jared Lyons also took aim at the Bank of England for a similar failure. Should Andrew Bailey resign or be sacked? A reference there to the governor of the Bank of England. Terry emailed us to say, why are we paying higher prices on products from last year? The fuel we're buying now is probably from oil drilled 6 months ago. Bang on the money, Terry. And the wheat and corn must have been harvested last summer. Bang on the money again. Surely the higher prices can't have fed through to the system yet. Profiteering, question mark? I think you're right, Terry. On crop shortages, Nick says, what's the problem with the wheat shortage? We people with celiac disease are unable to eat wheat and have to eat bread made from rice and potato flour. If we can do it, so can everyone else. Well, what I'd say is that the human race has been eating wheat since pre-biblical times. So I think that'll be a bit of a handbrake turn there, Nick, if I'm honest. And Wendy says we have to pay more for food. Our farmers are too precious to lose. If this means turning off the heat, then put on more jumpers. My family have done this during the high inflation of the 70s and the value of my mother's savings being noticeably eroded. Thanks for your emails today. Always great to hear from GB News viewers and listeners. And now it's time for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And as we look ahead to the spring statement tomorrow, much of our focus has been on rising energy prices and the spiralling cost of living. But business rates will also be a key feature of the Chancellor's statement tomorrow. Or maybe not, as pubs, restaurants and hospitality venues all pay extra taxes for running their services. And ahead of tomorrow's statement, the all-party parliamentary beer group have issued a report calling on Rishi Sunak to tear up the rule book on business rates and ensure digital firms that supply alcohol are subject to the same rates as small pubs. Here to tell us more, it's Mike Wood, chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Beer and Conservative MP for Dudley South. He is my latest guest on Money Talks. Mike Wood, very nice to see you in the On the Money studio, hot-footing it from Parliament to talk to us ahead of this spring statement tomorrow. Now, business rates are a bugbear of mine too, because we should make clear to viewers and listeners, businesses pay business rates on the value of their shops or their premises or their factories, their capital equipment, whether or not they make profit, whether or not they make any money at all.
Before they've sold a single pint or anything else they may be selling, they're paying that business rate. And in the case of pubs, it is based on someone's assessment of what they should be able to make. So it's a really subjective assessment. And so one person's assessment will be completely different to another. And so you end up with these massive disparities between pubs of similar sizes, similar locations. And in some cases, so our report mentions Wells & Co, a relatively small chain in, I think, Bedfordshire. Their turnover's £30 million a year, of which 3.1 million goes straight in business rates, and that's before they've paid any staff, any beer duty, any rent.
That's 10% of their turnover, not of their profit.
Not a profit.
Their turnover.
10% of turnover.
Of all the revenues they take in, from which we then must subtract costs, and that's unbelievable. You know, I have to put it to you, Mike, and I'm sure you will have noticed, I know lots of your fellow Tory MPs, even cabinet members, have noticed, back in the Labour conference last autumn, I listened to Rachel Reeves' speech. She's the Shadow Chancellor. And she said, we're going to scrap business rates. Now, it's very easy to scrap things when you're in opposition because you don't actually have to do it. Business rates raise about 30-odd billion pounds a year. It's big money. But I know a lot of Tory MPs like that idea, and I know the Federation of Small Businesses like that idea, and lots of GB News viewers and listeners like that idea. Meanwhile, we're still waiting for Rishi Sunak's review of business rates. It's been long delayed. What's going on?
Completely. And yes, you're right. We all love that idea. But 6 months after she promised that, she's not yet said what she would replace business rates with, where, as you said, over £30 billion, and that's more or less the school's budget that you need to find. Now, business rates, it's an outdated taxation system. At best, it's a 1960s form of taxation. In reality, it's really just based on the same form of tax from Victorian times and before that from Elizabethan
times. It's like a window tax or something.
It's a really outdated form of taxation that looks more at property values and assumes that the value of the property you're trading out of is what's really determining your viability, your profitability. If that was ever the case, it's not the case in the digital age. And that's why you see the multinational digital firms like Amazon, like Google's, who are paying almost nothing in business rates. They're also paying fairly little in corporation tax. And I would question your introduction. I don't really want to see them paying the same business rates as community pubs. I want to see community pubs paying the same business rates as Google and Amazon, and then we'll all be happy.
Sure, you want a level playing field. The thing that always irks me about business rates is that if you are a factory owner and you think, I'm going to expand my business, I'm going to employ more people, I'm going to generate more exports for the British economy, I'm going to put in this massive new machine to go with my other machine because I think we're onto a winner here and I'm going to build some prosperity. You are then effectively taxed on that machine forever because every year it's including in the assessment of business rates. Same as a publican. I know you're from the All-Party Parliamentary Beer Group. If a publican wants to, or a restaurateur wants to enhance the value, make a better environment for their clientele, again, the increased value of their property is then they're taxed on that forever. It seems a really back to front way of doing it.
Yes, I mean, it is particularly the case for hospitality because they are assessed in that different way. And as you say, if you invest, whether it's in your pub, your restaurant, your hotel, you're spending money to try and make it a better business, a better service for your customers, then there's a massive incentive because all that happens is you then, it's revalued, you end up paying the extra money every single year. At the very least, we need a decent holiday period where you can start to get some of the benefit of that investment back before it starts going back to the Treasury.
Now, across the UK, in the southeast, certainly in the Midlands, where you're the proud member for Dudley South, in the northwest, the northeast, the most prosperous, the least prosperous parts of the UK, high streets are being hollowed out. We're losing a lot of our physical shops. We're losing the kind of human benefit that comes from interacting in the marketplace, in the high street with each other. And that's partly because of the online giants and they're not paying business rates. Rachel Reeves has talked about, the Shadow Chancellor, she's talked about a kind of online sales tax. I admit she's done so very vaguely. But do you think that's the direction the Chancellor should be going towards?
Well, I mean, obviously the Chancellor's introduced a digital tax, so it's fairly confined. It's a modest amount at the moment. That's partly, I think, because of threats that were coming from those multinationals. It's partly to see how easy it is to collect.
They're quite mesmerised with the tech giants, a lot of politicians, aren't they?
Well, they can be, but one of the reasons why the Treasury really likes business rates is it has extremely high collection rates. It's very difficult.
You can't deny the business is there.
You can't just move the building out the way. Once you assess, you know what the bill is, and they know where to come after you. Whereas, obviously, for a lot of the multinational digital firms, it's less clear where money is being made. I mean, obviously, how you allocate costs around multinational operations. And so it's how easy is it to avoid paying the tax, I think, is one of the things that the Chancellor will be looking at. But yes, we do need that shift away from businesses, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's high street retail, whether it's hospitality, and actually some of these high profit multinational digital firms need to be paying their share.
He's got a real challenge tomorrow, hasn't he, Rishi Sunak? He's obviously, had some years when he's been very popular with the public. He's been handing out lots of money during the pandemic on furlough and so on. What's the mood on the Tory backbenches in terms of this national insurance increase that's coming down the track? Not everybody wants it, do they?
Well, I don't think any Conservatives go into politics or public life because they want to put up tax. They certainly don't want to put up personal taxation.
Do you think he should go ahead with it?
Well, I think he'll be looking at a lot of options tomorrow. So I'm probably not quite stupid enough to talk about what the Chancellor should or shouldn't do in a statement that's already been written. But yes, clearly, as you say, he was very popular when it's handing out money. It's easy to be popular when you're spending hundreds of billions of pounds. So he's spent best part of £500 billion since the election that hadn't been budgeted on, both on obviously trying to tackle the pandemic, supporting individuals, businesses and jobs through the pandemic. You can't carry on spending that kind of money forever. And that's why, even though borrowings come in slightly lower than forecast, you're still talking £8-9 billion a month.
And much of that being paid on debt interest now. Right. So we're borrowing money to pay...
on the debt interest.
Indeed.
Debt interest is £8-9 billion a month. That means we're likely to spend just on servicing the debt this year around £50 billion. So we'll be spending more on debt interest than we spend on educating our children.
Unbelievable. Deeply immoral. For me, that is the immorality of big public sector debt. Final question, Mike. How's the cost of living squeeze impacting your constituents? And do you think the Chancellor gets the extent to which it is?
Yeah, I mean, we've sat down with the Chancellor. He absolutely understands whether it's energy bills, whether it's filling up your car, whether it's any of the number of other price rises that are resulting from the global increases in prices across a whole range of products and services. Is making a big impact on families in every part of the country, not least in my own constituency in Dudley South.
Mike Wood, great. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you being our latest Money Talks guest. Have you back in the studio another time. Very good to see you. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a Spring Statement special. It'll be me and someone called Gloria De Piero. Who's she? From 11 a.m. to 4 p.m, you lucky people. We'll have a great lineup of GB News reporters, viewers, economists, politicians focusing on the Spring Statement, what it means for you. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. That was On the Money.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Today is simply sunny and warm for the vast majority, but the odd shower is possible in one or two spots. High pressure still to the east of the UK, blocking weather systems from moving in from the Atlantic, maintaining a warm southerly airflow and a dry airflow as well, hence the largely cloud-free skies, but there are areas of cloud drifting north, and those areas of predominantly medium-level cloud could spark the odd shower, perhaps across the Midlands into the afternoon, or northern England, southern